so that we can kind of hopefully get some clarity on what fundraising is. Yeah, so as I said, I did fundraising myself. I grew up in a family that we were taught independence, which is awesome, and I'm super thankful for that. But when you're faced with the idea of depending on others for fundraising, it's quite countercultural. And so it's a really humbling experience. But we know that fundraising is something that can be really fearful for people. You know, you're asking yourself, can I do this? Is it right for me to do this? Is it ethical? Can I ask people for money? What will people think of me? And there's kind of this fear of rejection maybe. So it's normal. Those feelings are really normal when you're walking into fundraising. And so I just kind of wanted to go over today some principles that may help you see the value in fundraising and hear from people who just finished the fundraising process, who actually are going to go to the field in just a couple of weeks. So let's introduce our panel. We have Evelyn and Sarah with us. They're not going to be sharing where they're going, but how about we start with Evelyn, just share maybe your major and then a quick 2 minutes of why you felt like this mission work was the best next step for you in your life.
Yeah, hi, I'm Evelyn. I studied psychology and I got connected with GoCore through my university. Mission work wasn't really on my radar as something to do post-graduation, but this program came up through my university, got me connected to GoCore, and just the opportunity that presented itself became something I couldn't really ignore. I think the opportunity to be involved with a community development team that was also sharing the gospel with an unreached people was something that was like, oh my gosh, this couldn't be more perfect for me, even though it was not on my radar at all. So just walking through this program and then getting connected with GoCore and learning really what this ministry would look like was something that the Lord just kept putting in front of me, and the door stayed open. I really kept praying. I said, Lord, don't close the door if this isn't what you have for me. And the door stayed open and stayed open. And so it's just this process of saying, okay, Lord, I really think this is what you're calling me to, even though it wasn't something I had planned for myself, which is really exciting. So it definitely feels like an adventure for me. Yeah, so I will be serving on a team that is sharing the gospel with unreached people and investing in clean water projects and villages that community development, which just kind of means working with local people to address the issues that they see in their communities and working with them to make changes. So I'm really excited about it. And that's a little bit about me.
Cool. Thanks, Evelyn. Sarah?
Yeah. Hi, guys. I'm Sarah. So I went to school for biology, and for the longest time was like medical field is the way to go. That was kind of since high school, I had decided that's what we were gonna do, and Jesus, you were just gonna follow me, and I totally thought I was in charge. And then junior year came around, and really over winter break, I went to this conference called Urbana through InterVarsity. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's awesome. And it was during that conference that I really began to question, wow, have I even asked the Lord what he would have for my future, what he would have for this life that I have to live for him? And that launched me into a season of intense prayer, just talking to the Lord about my future and my plans, and being humble towards being willing to switch, career paths if that's what he would have me do. And if I were to stay in the medical field, that would be great too. But I wanted to really be attentive to what the Lord might be calling me into. And so it was during those couple of months of prayer that I began to notice just an increased curiosity for cross-cultural ministry. And this is something that was really new to me, similar to Evelyn. I was not anticipating being called into mission field, but it happened. And I could not be more thankful and excited to partner with the Lord in this work. And yeah, it's been a roller coaster for sure, but it's so cool to see the Lord continue to be faithful and in this calling, and to, like Evelyn said, he just kept opening the doors and the opportunities. I just kept stepping forward into them. And yeah, it's amazing to see how the Lord has shifted my perspective about time and my future, and just this life that we have to live for him and what that really means. It's really cool. So yeah, I'm headed to a team that will be serving refugees in a variety of different ministries, and yeah, launching out first week of March. So super pumped. gonna be awesome.
I'm so excited for you guys. It's so awesome that your journeys are, the journey of preparing is coming to an end and you are going now. It's so exciting. Yeah, I'm excited to hear about just what your experience has been in fundraising. But first, I wanted to share just a couple principles about fundraising, some of the principles that I think were the most encouraging in my experience in fundraising, and then some that I just have seen that are really encouraging for people. So the first one is receiving funds for ministry from others is biblical. Receiving funds for your ministry from others is biblical. So let's start with the greatest example, Jesus. Luke 8, 1-3 says, soon afterward, he went on through cities and villages, proclaiming and bringing the good news of the kingdom of God. And the 12 were with him, and also some women who had been healed of evil spirits and infirmities. Mary called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had gone out, and Joanna, the wife of Chuza, Herod's household manager, and Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their means. So these women were with them to provide them with their means. That was their role in the ministry. And I love that they were healed from Jesus. Like Jesus healed them. And so Jesus affected their lives so much that they wanted to give their means. And Jesus had the authority to provide miraculously. I mean, in John, it says, like, if we listed out all the miracles that Jesus did, we wouldn't have enough books in the world. So there's so many miracles that Jesus did, but he chose to allow himself and his disciples to be supported through the generosity of others. And also, Jesus was a carpenter. He could have repaired things or made furniture and saved up for his ministry, which is something huge that is a setback for people. Why can't I save up money for my own ministry, which is totally valid? But Jesus didn't. He's fully God, and he saw receiving support from the women as a legitimate source of income, which is, I love that, because that's what I needed to hear in my fundraising experience, that this is a legitimate source of income. So GoCore offers, we do like a week fundraising training twice a year to all goers. So those are what we call people who go with GoCore. And we ask some people, what is something that you learned through our Go Week? That's our fundraising training week. And one person said, God himself relied on people to support his ministry during his incarnation. So there is not shame, but dignity in doing the same as we live out his commission. So we're trying to avoid the shame, like this isn't bad, but also we can gain dignity from it, that it's worthy to ask people, you're worthy of the wage. That's something that we always say. So I think that's a really encouraging perspective. Also, there's an awesome quote from Scott Morton. He says, if it were wrong to be supported by the personal gifts of others, Jesus Christ would not have allowed it in his own ministry. If Jesus became vulnerable enough to be supported by others, you and I must be willing to as well. And there's so much that we need to be willing. I mean, just as Sarah and Evelyn were talking about, there needs to be this willingness to say, okay, Lord, like, here's my major. This is what I wanted to do, but I'm giving you my life. And there needs to be a willingness. And that's the same thing with fundraising. So the second principle that I would say is people need and want to give. People need and want to give to your ministry. Basically, in other words, it's normal. I mean, the first principle, like the first idea is that in this is that God's a giver. I mean, that's his character. The most popular, I don't know, like well-known verse in the Bible, John 3:16, for God gave his son. God so loved the world that he gave his son. He's a giver. That's his character. He wants to give to you. And just in general, in a factual point, 95.4% of households give to charity, and only 70% claim association with some form of Christianity. So it's not just the church, but it's normal for households to give. That's a very normal vocabulary, normal thing. And also in the church, pastors' salaries are from tithes of the church. The church gives so that the church can give the salary to the pastors. That's normal, that's accepted. And so we should accept that for ourselves as well. And also, there's just a huge command to give in the Bible, to give financially, to give our means. One example, I'll read 1 Timothy 6:17-19. Command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor to put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share in this way. In this way, they will lay up treasure for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. So it's giving people an opportunity to give, to respond to the commandment that we're being told, which is to give to people and be generous in all the ways that we need to be generous, and one is monetarily. The last principle I would say is really encouraging, is we are mobilizing the church to be a part of God's global work. We're mobilizing the church to engage with God's global work. We're not only giving people a chance to give, which is what we just talked about, but we give them an opportunity to think differently about the world and to actually be engaging with the world, not just engaging with the people around them, but globally. There's a book called The God Ask by Steve Shadrach, which is a really popular book on fundraising, gives a great structure for fundraising. I encourage you to read it. But one quote in it, it says, what if you were to start viewing yourself as a mobilizer, not just moving people's finances from one bank to another, but moving their hearts from a temporal focus to an eternal one. I love that. I find that quote to be so encouraging because it puts a greater purpose to fundraising. And when you higher up that purpose, then in turn, it shrinks your fear because you're encouraging people to invest in the kingdom. So those are my quick 3 principles. Hopefully that can be kind of a encouraging switch of mindset. So receiving funds for ministry from others is biblical. People need and want to give. It's normal. And we are mobilizing the church to be a part of God's global work. So those are the 3 principles that I would share. And now that we have those, I'd love to talk to our panelists about their real life examples, their stories of their fundraising process. So you guys can share whenever, but I'll just start with a question of what were some of your fears about fundraising when you first started, and how did your perspective change, or how did you see yourself kind of let go of those fears?
Okay, I can go first. But yeah, I think one of the most prominent fears I had going into support raising was kind of carrying the fears of my family a lot of times. And so my grandparents and parents in particular were really fearful, I guess, and they were really doubtful that this would actually work. And so they kept asking questions like, okay, so if you don't get support, what's going to happen, or all these things. And so kind of going into support raising training through Gold Corps, I had a lot of those fears on my shoulders. And that was translating too into just my fear of how are people even going to perceive me? If my parents and grandparents aren't loving this idea, are most of my friends and neighbors not going to love this idea either? Am I going to make them feel uncomfortable? Am I going to make them feel awkward? All these things. And yeah, and it's amazing to see the Lord in that. And how when I first started meeting, I remember going to my first appointment ever, and I actually got into a fender bender, the very first appointment I ever had, and I got hit by a car on the way there. It was, yeah, this is classic. But at the same time, it reminded me, it's okay, just as I only have so much control on the road, I don't have a lot of control about how other people are driving, whatever. The Lord is in control of this process, and He is in control of other people's hearts, and He's steering them towards a direction, towards giving or towards not giving, and he's moving in each of their lives individually. And so I think it was cool, in a way, to get set up like that, because it really set me up to be okay, the Lord is working in their hearts individually as He's working in mine, and how can we partner together in the kingdom for a kingdom focus, a kingdom vision. And so it was cool. It wasn't an immediate thing, right, where you're all of a sudden boom, all the fears are gone. But I think it was a gradual learning process to see how the Lord really stretched me to place those fears in His hands, and to trust not only the support raising journey in His hands, but also other people in His hands and their lives and their journeys. So yeah, I think that is kind of some of the fears and what the Lord did.
Yeah, gosh. I feel like I am a very do-it-yourself person. And so when I started looking at support raising and the numbers, I was like, oh my gosh, those are big numbers, first of all. And then, we're in the middle of a pandemic. So people's financial situations are a little bit up in the air. So I was like, God, how is this going to happen? I start looking at like my savings account. I'm like, okay, well, if I drain that, then I'll only have to raise, that much less and all these things. And so really the principles that Brie was just sharing were things that I like told myself, like remind myself constantly, like before each meeting, I'd be like, okay, these are the things that I know to be true. And just like say a prayer saying like, Lord, truly this is in your hands, like Sarah was saying. And just, Lord, give me the words to say, like, let me present your heart in this ministry, in this opportunity. And so it was really challenging at first, but again, like Sarah said, it was a process. And so much of that, like those fears and that intimidation of like asking people for support totally diminished by the end of support raising. Like I was thrilled for each meeting. I was like looking forward to it. It was best. And it really was just like such a blessing to be able to sit down with people and share my story and the story of what God is doing in my life and what he has in store for me. So it was just this so neat and so special to have this daunting task maybe of support raising turn it into like such a blessing. And God met me in each of those years and each of those places. And again, that's not to say it like isn't scary or isn't intimidating. Like there's so many times where I'm like, okay, I need to call this person. Like I'd so much rather like send a text or email them. Like that just feels easier. But it really is like the sitting back and saying like, okay, Lord, how can I be faithful in this and trust that this is, like I am worthy of my wage, that you have called me to this and that like you are working in people's lives. And if you call them to give and to partner in this ministry, then they will. And like maybe to add something that was important for me to Bree's 3 kind of tips or truths was that support raising in itself is ministry. So like that was something that was helpful for me and encouraging because instead of it kind of allowed me to shift it instead of thinking like, oh, this is like support raising for me. I was able to share my story and kind of be a ministry to people I was sharing with. I was saying, this is the Lord's faithfulness. This is how he's continued to be faithful. And even that was encouraging because people would say like, oh my gosh, what a great story. Or like, you're already this like far in your support raising, like how miraculous. So that was encouraging to me too. And I think that's really helpful if you can view it as encouraging other people as you share and ask for support.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm all for not romanticizing it, like it's sometimes can be hard, fundraising definitely can be hard, but also when you take a step back sometimes, it's so cool that my job for a little bit is to connect with people and to share my heart and to you just see what God's doing in their lives and pray for them. And as you go to the field, continually be praying for people. So that is a really unique gift. And yeah, I love what you shared, Evelyn. And also Sarah, like our parents care for us. They want what's best for us. This is scary. Like they want to support us in what we do, but this is so scary for a multitude of reasons. I definitely experienced that fear from my parents, but I always encourage people who are thinking about doing this, invite your parents into the process. That's something that I did not do very well. And I wish that I would have invited my parents more into the process of like, this is what I'm thinking, and this is where I'm going, and this is what I'm fearful about it, and all those kind of things. Because just as much as you're processing it, they're processing it. Like, my baby is going to the Middle East, that's scary. So just the fundraising and everything can be fearful for them just as much as, it can be fearful for you, maybe in different ways. So inviting them into the process is great. Another question I have is just kind of sharing a story of how you were surprised by the generosity of some people. I know people who have gone through the fundraising process definitely experience that, the surprise. Maybe it was someone you weren't expecting to give, or they gave very generously, or something other than a monetary donation that people gave that was really encouraging to you.
Dang, I have so many examples. Like the Lord is truly astounding and faithful and provider. So like that's part of the exciting thing too, is just watching how the Lord provides. But like I'll share 2 quick little stories. One of them was like a fear of mine was support raising in a pandemic. Like how can I justify asking people to support me in a season where so many people have lost jobs and income is unsteady and health issues and all these things. But I have had multiple people give out of like the stimulus checks that people were given and saying this is something that we wouldn't have had just, outside of this pandemic circumstance. And they gave from that. And so that was just a really neat moment for me to say, Lord, you took this fear and you turned it into blessing. So I think that was really special to me and an encouragement. And another story was I was meeting with this family. I gave swimming lessons to their kids. They have 8 kids. 5 of them are adopted. They're all they're all pretty young. And so I got to share my story and present to the whole family. So all 8 kids and the parents, and it was great. And so the family decided to support me, but also the kids decided to support me. So their 13-year-old gave $100. She gave out of her savings account. The 5-year-old gave $3. Oh my gosh, their mom texted me about what they were, deciding to give. And I just broke down. I read it to my mom and I just cried. These young kids wanting to partner and support in the way that they're able. And that really just encouraged my heart. It is ministry and the connecting the church. These young kids get to contribute the $3 that they have to help me go. And then I get to share stories from when I'm serving back with them to be an encouragement. So it's just an absolute season of blessing. And there are definitely trials and hard times, but I have come out of it just feeling so encouraged.
Oh my word, yeah. Kids are the most precious things. I actually have a similar story. I work with some middle school girls at my church, and one Wednesday after I spoke at church, one of my middle school girls came up and gave me $20 and said, "I'm so excited for you." And I'm like, yeah, I cried. I was like, this is amazing. But yeah, I love kids. They're the best. But also I remember this one family friend of mine who I met with during a support raising appointment, and he has been actually going through cancer. So he has a brain tumor and he's been going through radiation and chemo. And it was amazing because as I'm sharing, he's also sharing. It was a dual kind of testimony sharing of what the Lord's been doing in our lives over the past years. And it was the coolest thing because he really spoke to me on a lot of different levels of just how the Lord's been working in his heart. And it was crazy because that was what I needed to hear. He was talking about walking in the freedom of grace and these different things. And for him to be able to minister to me as I'm having this support raising appointment, it was so cool. And he ended up being so generous. He actually sent me a couple books and stuff that had really impacted him the last couple of years as he's been, journeying through cancer and wrestling with the Lord about different things. And it's just so cool how the stories of people can be such a gift in this season too. And that's a way that an unforeseen blessing of provision, I guess, is the words of people and how the Lord uses those stories to minister to us. And it's so cool to be able to steward those. But yeah, it's just, there's so many cool things too. Just people that you maybe walked into the apartment thinking I know these people have been struggling. I don't have a high expectation that they're going to give or anything. And then they just blow you out of the water with a generous gift because they see the vision of the Lord. And it's so cool. It's yeah, it's the most humbling thing. And I've cried many times at support raising appointments, and it's good though. But yeah, it's amazing to see the generosity of folks, and not only with money, but also just with their stories and all these things. It's really, really stinking cool.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing. I remember personally in my own story, one of the best stories that I found, the most encouraging, was I was preparing for the VBS at my church, and a ton of group of people together cutting out things and decorating. And one woman just was next to me and she said, "What? Tell me about yourself." And I said, "Oh, I'm moving to the Middle East in a couple months." And she said, "Oh, I want to support you," which was a win because, I didn't even have to ask, which I'm like, okay, great. That's so awesome. And then she's like, "Why don't I put on a party for you and invite some of my friends to come and you can just present?" And I got 3 supporters at that meeting, and it was she's such a prayer warrior and has been since I left for the Middle East. So it's just really encouraging, just the people that you don't even know that are going to be walking with you alongside you in this journey, which is really great. One last question that I'll ask you guys. What would you say to someone who is really excited about going, wants to go to the field, but is just extremely hesitant about the fundraising process? Very normal for a lot of candidates who are thinking about going, a lot of people.
Dang. I would say, like, don't try and ignore those feelings, and don't try and like rationalize them away. Like, feel them, because it is big. It is a big ask, and I would just say bring that to the Lord and invite him to meet you in that. I think one of the things I so appreciated about GoCore was they do such a good job of walking you through and preparing you for the support raising process. Like, I would not have felt as comfortable as I did support raising, and I think been as successful. I mean, it's the Lord's provision, but like, I would not have felt as successful if not for all the training and preparation that GoCore does to support you through the process. And just, they do a good job of drawing you closer to the Lord and watching him provide. Uh, yeah, I think it is definitely a faith and trusting exercise. But if you can bring those fears to the Lord and take that step of faith, oh my gosh, the Lord will bless you in so many ways. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get your funds like that. I think that was something I needed to come to terms with too. Like, the Lord's blessing isn't just in immediacy of hitting your goals. The Lord's blessing is in those little conversations. It's with the connections with your support raising cohort. Like, a girl on my team, our deadline to be fully funded is Friday. She hit on 100% yesterday. So she just like squeaked by. But gosh, I know that she's going to have stories of God's faithfulness throughout that. So yeah, it might have been, a longer road for her, but the support raising process is like nothing that I've ever experienced. It like grew my faith so much. My mom tells me so frequently, she goes, Katie, Evelyn, like, what a blessing it was to watch you support raise, and like my faith was encouraged through that. So yeah, it's amazing. It's hard, but do it, and the Lord will just walk with you every step of the way.
Ooh, word. I was gonna say something really similar. I actually remember one of the first couple meetings, like after we kind of like started sport raising, and we were actually meeting with Bree, and because she was our cohort leader for Evelyn and I, and so we just like met with her on a semi-regular basis. And I remember Bree telling us actually that like the Lord can handle our big feelings, like he can handle our big fears and our big feelings, and like don't be afraid to bring those to the Lord. And so actually really similar to Evelyn's story, like that is like something that, yeah, all those feelings and fears that you might have about support raising, like the Lord is big enough to handle those. And yeah, I just think that is such a peace. And to really trust the Lord with those things is hard. And like I struggled with that for weeks. And like Brie knows, because I just, yeah. But it's so cool to see like how he does. He holds us in his hand. And yeah, to not be fearful of support raising is a journey, but like the Lord will like graciously lead you through that. And yeah, I think just the opportunities in support raising are so incredible. A lot of people in my community didn't really know anyone, like they haven't personally supported a missionary themselves, and because I come from a really small town, and so it was really cool to see support raising as a ministry, like Evelyn was saying, and to see the kingdom perspective of support raising is so cool. So like even like experiencing these fears of like I want to go, but like support raising is scary. It's like your ministry starts when you start support raising, and it's so cool to almost to anticipate that and be like, okay, Lord, like how can you use me in this season to like share your truth and your good news, and also like how can you prepare my heart to leave in this season as well. And it's such an opportunity for growth. And so I think, yeah, like it's hard to say don't fear, because I totally get it. And like it's so countercultural, but it is so worth it. And like I come out of support raising now like so seeing the Lord's purpose and his provision in the season and how much he used it to teach me things about himself and his character and teach me things about myself and also just his kingdom. And so, yeah, it's so worth it. It is hard. It is really tiring. Learn to Sabbath well. But it is so good and so worth it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's gold, some golden nuggets there. Both of you guys. Yeah, Sarah, I remember when we were talking about Sabbath, I was like, learn to Sabbath well, starting now. That is a big thing. So that's awesome. Yeah, well, thank you for your guys' time. Just wanted to say that our first application deadline is March 1st. So just in a couple weeks for those of you who would like to be going to the field in the fall, which around September, October. So applications are online, and I will put in the chat for you all the application link. And then if you would like any more information or have some specific questions about what you could do on the field or how you want to use your degree overseas, that's my email right there. So feel free to email me with any questions that you have. I'd be happy to answer them. So I hope that this event was encouraging, because there are many fears that can come up even when we start talking about fundraising, but it's such a beautiful process that the Lord really delights to show himself in. So thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you to our panelists again. So I hope you have an awesome day, and we'll see you at our next online virtual event.